good afternoon, everyone. It's Monday afternoon, and we're joined again by Alyssa this week because Connor is away on vacation.
And as you can hear, it's thundering outside.
I'm sure that picked up, so hey. So we're going to kick off this week. I'm going to ask Andrew a question to kind of get things started. Yesterday he said that it was in the chapters that we looked at yesterday, 4 and 5, that there's a huge political statement that's being made. Can you explain that briefly to everyone? And then let's talk about this question. How should our faith values be reflected when we enter the voting booth?
Okay, so if you remember listening to the message and looking at that, and when you turn to particular chapter 5, it talks about how it presents Jesus. Here's the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and it talks about Jesus, and for a Jewish audience, this screams Messiah and comes right back to the whole conversation about the ascendancy and returning to David's throne and the establishment of David's kingdom. So it's really loud about reasserting Jewish moving forward in the kingdom of Israel. And really, as you look at that and you watch the process, the question is, who's going to open the scroll? And as you talk about opening the scroll, you're really talking about going. Heaven is about to go to war. They are about to engage, and there's a confrontation between the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light. The kingdom of light being Jesus and reestablishing the kingdom of Israel and confronting worldliness. And we also talked about in 2 Thessalonians chapter, I think it's 2, it talked about how Satan's kingdom and the Antichrist's kingdom is also based on delusion and how people would believe a lie. And I don't know if you kind of go through things today, but you maybe look at things and you say to yourself, how can people believe that? If you've ever asked yourself that question, and part of the reason people believe that is because God has allowed them to believe the lies. And so what's taking place now in heaven in this whole conversation is a confrontation really between righteousness and evil. And so there's a going forward in that whole process. And so for me, as I wrestle through, as I think about the question, I would ask the question, I would probably start to process through as I go into the voting booth. I would ask the question, the people that I'm voting for, how do they represent God's values versus the values that would be more reflected like in the Antichrist or faith and practices that are opposed to Christ? Because you're going to see those values that are being more reflected that are not biblical, not scriptural, are probably values that are reflecting more of those opposed to God than of those who support God. And so I think it's really a question of righteousness versus wickedness. And again, it's not a left or right, particularly if you're voting tomorrow, because you're only voting in a single lane. Tomorrow is primary day, and so if someone's a Democrat, they're only going to be voting for Democratic candidates. If someone's Republican, you're only voting for Republican candidates. So even in that, it's not so much a left or right as much as it's really an issue in my mind of how am I choosing to allow my faith to influence those that I want to represent us in government.
Any thoughts?
When I first read over the question, the first chapter passage of scripture that jumped in my head was Romans 13, which is like the cliche passage to talk about when it comes to governing authorities and stuff. But the first couple of verses of Romans 13 talks about the fact that basically any person that's in authority has been put in authority by God. And so as like that question was being asked, or as I was reading through it, I was like, okay, well, I think we all have to come into the understanding that whoever ends up in authority has been placed there by God, but that doesn't keep us from being held accountable to vote for who we believe is someone that reflects those qualities and those things that are seen throughout the gospel, because no person is going to be entirely on biblical basis with their beliefs. And so it's just realizing what aligns the most with scripture, but also being very keenly aware of having humility and grace when the person you voted for wasn't elected, or something else happens that, you know, God put whoever's in charge for a reason, and that he will work through them, even if it doesn't make sense to us. That's the mindset I'm coming into my next election with. So.
Yeah, I think, and we've talked about this as we have talked over the last few months and done these roundtable type discussions after the messages, we so often tend to compartmentalize everything in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even as followers of Jesus, we do that sometimes with our politics. And we want our faith to match our politics instead of our politics matching our faith.
Correct.
And we do that.
That's a great flip, by the way.
Yeah.
I really like
I
that.
stole that from Andy Stanley. I heard
Okay.
that this past week. So it's not new with me. But the way we match our politics with our faith is by getting back into the Word.
Mm-hmm.
We look at what Jesus said in the Gospels. We look at what Paul says. We examine all of Scripture. And then we kind of say, okay, yeah, this person kind of reflects God's values more than this. Maybe not even this person, this party, or this mind, way of thinking, whatever it might be at that time. And I honestly think that some of that flip-flops back and forth over time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the real difficulty, I think.
Well, if I can say that
Yeah.
for a second, because, and I'm going to come back to left or right, because when we talk about this is not a differentiation between left or right, because it doesn't matter which side. You might have a person on opposite sides of the coin at the same time representing different values and different priorities that you're going to sift through.
And that's where the real rub's going to come in, and we examine that and say, well, this person falls in line biblically here, this person falls in line biblically here, and how do I make that happen? And that's where we just trust God for wisdom in the midst of all that.
Yep, very cool.
Hey, all right, we'll be back on Wednesday with another question. Hope you'll join us.